Hey, it's Dave Bauer.
And this is Brian Mertens, and you're listening to ReWilding Conversations.
Hey, Brian. It's nice to hear your voice, and I'm really excited about this conversation we're having today, especially on this Friday. When I've just returned from a family vacation in one of the Finger Lakes here in New York State, Chuka Lake, and had a remarkable nature immersion for 5 days with my whole family, and it was just such a wonderful gift on the water, freshwater lake. And then this topic that we've decided to touch on of mindfulness and how mindfulness can aid in nature mentoring. Really looking forward to this conversation. And just checking back, how's your day? How are you this morning, this afternoon?
I am actually doing great. And I'm really excited for this topic. And it's something that I integrate with my life. So it's such an important part of what I do. Even just before this call, I was out sitting in my yard and just closing my eyes and listening to the wind blowing in the trees. There's a little bit of a hurricane off the coast right now, and so it's a little bit windy here. But there's crickets out there, and it just really clears my mind being out there. And so definitely just excited to talk a little bit more about that mysterious thing that happens to the human brain when we go outside and find ourselves dropping into this feeling of peace. And I'm sure you got a good dose of that on your vacation.
Yeah, did. A blend of terrestrial time and a blend of aquatic time, because we had a pontoon boat where 15 people could sit on that, so it's about as good as it gets. The only thing we didn't go is aerial. We didn't rent a hot air balloon for the week, so we stayed either on the water or on the land. So it was lovely, lovely nature immersion. When it comes to this topic of mindfulness, let me talk a little bit about what that kind of means for me, in terms of its definition, its description. So mindfulness for me is a real simple definition that I often like to fall back on, is just being in the moment. Be here both in time and be here in place. So an example, if I'm outside, as you just described, there's a wind, and I'm feeling the wind, and I'm here feeling this wind, and I'm sensing this temperature of the day and the amount of light. I'm here. I'm physically here in the physical environment. And then, since I'm the one perceiving it, mindfulness also references me, the person having this experience. So, where am I? How am I? Am I excited? Am I tired? Am I energetic? Am I moody? Am I happy? Am I down? So just a check-in with the moment. So it adds a quality of it being very real. So when we talk about mindfulness and nature mentoring, with that kind of broad description of what it means to me, when you use the word mindfulness in your life or in this podcast, how will you be referencing the word mindfulness? What will it mean to you, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty similar. Just thinking about how so often people move through their lives and just caught up in their head and not really paying too much attention to the moment and being present, and just having a conscious recognition of how life is moving by moment to moment. And I think for me there's a big element of the implications that the quality of your awareness has on your life experience. If you go through a stressful day and you're just not really taking any time to really slow down and be present with what's happening, that stress is just going to feel worse, and it's just going to snowball and continue. But, for me, just by going outside, this is what I was talking about earlier, and I do this very intentionally when I notice myself, after periods of, just really working on something for an extended period of time, I'll just go outside and slow my brain down and just really tune in with the moment. And it's like this fog of stress and just whatever I've been working on, it starts to lift, and I find myself emerging into this completely new emotion, this new feeling state where my mind is much more clear. I'm much more able to grasp the big picture and just feel good about my life, and being able to move forward in a creative way. So that's pretty much what I think of.
So here we stumble upon this about a week ago. Let's talk about mindfulness. And I had literally just sent out a day or two prior to that my newsletter. The title is Nature, Our Mentor on Mindfulness. Nature being our conduit to mindfulness. And you talk about life moving quickly. So the opening line in the newsletter says, life moves so quickly today that precious moments can pass us by if we maintain this fast pace. Nature is a great mentor, teaching us to slow down, focus on the present moment, and absorb all the surroundings that is around us using our senses. And this practice that nature encourages can be very vibrant and replenishing. And so this immersion in nature is mindful, and one almost can't be in nature unless you're running from a lava flow, and even then you're real mindful if you're running from a lava flow and a volcano's erupted behind you. You're certainly in the moment, but it might not be so calm and serene as what I started with my opening line. So I do think it's a real gift of slowing down. We live in a world that agreeably is very fast-paced, and nature gives us this glorious invitation 24 hours a day. Step out into me, be with me, nature says, and I will heal. I can heal. So we just need to heed the call. We need to hear it, and then we need to, act on it. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
There's something resonating in my mind as we're talking about all this, and it's just thinking about the idea of like a Jedi Knight, and in Star Wars how they have the Jedis, their whole training is around just really being present and tuning in, and just opening up your mind to this mystical force. And it struck me when you were talking about the lava example and how that would bring you to the moment, and it just made me think of how mindfulness is something that everyone experiences in those moments when we really get called to our senses, and it's really common for that to happen and easy for that to happen outside, but it's also something that we can actually train on in a very intentional way. And so I think thinking about the overall intention of ReWilding conversations, we're having conversations about how human beings, how we can help our communities, help the people in our lives, help the kids to reconnect with nature and get all the really benefits of doing that in their life. And so Yeah, I even think that there's an element of this where by actually practicing mindfulness in a more intentional way, we can improve our ability to be more mindful and actually tap into our instincts on a deeper level. It's kind of like someone running away from that lava flow. They're going to be in the moment, and someone running away from that lava flow who has also spent 10 years training their awareness and practicing mindfulness outside, they're going to be in a different position. They're going to notice different options when they're in that danger situation. And so I think there's it's really interesting to think about how mindfulness affects us both in the short term, those moments when we get suddenly called into a state of mindfulness, without really choosing it, versus the long-term effects of, doing 10 minutes of mindfulness every single day, and just how that gets into your brain on a really deep level.
Yeah.
So,
wow, you're hitting some really rich threads here. So let's do a little segue to a technique. Let's get real and organic and physiological. Let's talk about breath awareness. So for any of our listeners that have had some opportunity to practice breath awareness, and for those that have yet to give it a try, breath awareness is a tool by which you remember your breathing all the time anyways, so why not become aware of how you're breathing? And when I become aware of how I'm breathing, the quality of my breathing, it's a real huge, cool shift into mindful breath. So I can elect to breathe shallowly or deeply. I can elect to soften my diaphragm and bring the air into the lung in a really deep capacity by softening the diaphragm and letting it go down into the digestive cavity some. And now I take a longer, fuller breath, pulling in more oxygen. And when I exhale, I release more carbon dioxide. So almost instantaneously, things start happening at a cellular level with more oxygen in your circulatory system, with more oxygen saturating your cells, and with your cells having permission to get rid of a waste product, carbon dioxide. So when one takes 5 minutes, and I mean 5 minutes, and does a week or 2 week immersion in breath awareness, that will absolutely catalyze the process of mindfulness. And you will find that when you elect to do that outside, now you've connected the dot. You've done a technique, mindful breathing, breath awareness, and you've done it intentionally outdoors in a setting that hopefully isn't too frenetic, and you're taking in natural light and natural fresh air, and you're hearing natural sounds, or you're hearing silence, depending on where you are in nature. It just calms us. It calms us. It makes us better. It makes us clearer. We can be kinder to ourselves, and we can be kinder to each other as we go to nature, and nature assists us in mindful capacity. And breath awareness works. It works. Your body, you can't trick your body. If you start breathing slow, gentle breaths, nice and deep, you're wired to become calmer and clearer and relaxed. So do you find you use any particular technique like breath awareness for yourself personally or with others that you like, that you'd like to share during our conversation, Brian?
Yeah. For me, I always am thinking about, I spent a long time just studying how the mind works, and thinking about brain patterns, and I think one of the reasons why people, sometimes get stuck in like long-term feelings of anxiety or stress or just being, in just the kind of frustration that sometimes is created, being inside for so long. It's that we're sort of our thought patterns and our brain patterns are not going through any kind of reset mode.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're kind of stuck on this one train of thought, and it's creating this stress in our body. And the longer we stay in that train of thought, the more that stress just perpetuates and continues. But your brain can only focus on so many things at once. It's there's a point at which your brain and your focus as you're moving through life, it's like you can't focus on a million different things, so you have to hone in on a small number of things. And to me, the senses, there's a reason why a really high percentage of the world's best meditation techniques are based in the senses, because they have this direct link to your brain. And if you're really for me, my favorite way to do this, the thing that works really well for me, is to just focus on listening and just being outside and being in my ears. And because if you're really listening very, very deeply to all the different bird sounds and the crickets and the wind blowing in the trees, and even like the cars driving down the road, I tune into all that kind of stuff when I'm sitting out there. And it's not possible to think while you're doing that, because it's so much for you to be tracking with your ears that it kind of jams the thought process. And when it jams the thought process, it's like you can't be stressed anymore. And because the things that you're thinking about, and the sort of the beliefs and the ongoing brain patterns, that's the thing that's creating all the stress in the first place. And so I think anything that is able to get us absorbed in our senses really, really deeply is a really great way to get that mindfulness going. And you made me think about something when you were talking about the breath awareness and just being tuned in with your breath. I had a yoga teacher a few years back, and he told a story about this study that had been done. And I never looked it up for myself, but I trust what he was saying. And basically what he was saying is that when you focus your attention, because in yoga you put your body into different positions, and you notice the effect that those positions have on your mind, and it's like a body and mind connection. And he was basically talking about how when you put your focus into your hand, or in any part of your body, it actually on a subtle level, it increases the blood flow to that part of your body. So just placing your awareness in your feet makes more blood start to flow to your feet, and it makes more attention go to your feet. And so I got this idea one day when I was outside, to actually, as I'm listening deeply to nature, to just put my attention in my ears and actually like focus my kinesthetic awareness on my ears. And it totally just dramatically increased how much I was hearing. Like I felt like I could hear a pin drop from a mile away. I was just so tuned in. And so it's sort of a very roundabout way of saying that my favorite technique, the one that I always default to, is just going outside, sitting down, and tuning in with my ears as deeply as I possibly can. And within about 5-10 minutes, I'm in a totally different state of mind. So
So we touched on breath awareness as a physiological methodology. We talked about listening as a sensual modality for fostering nature's capacity to help us be mindful. Something that we've discussed in the past, and I'm certain we've mentioned with our followers, is the use of a sit spot. So whenever you intentionally stop and climb a tree and sit, or stand someplace and call it a sit spot, or literally sit in a comfortable location, then you are inviting nature to do its healing work with you in mindfulness, because you've slowed down and stopped moving. And when you no longer require your skeleton and your brain and your muscles to move you and balance you, that frees up a lot of awareness. So sitting or being still is remarkably mindful and significantly enhances nature's gift of assisting you in mindfulness. My more vivid historical memory of that is when I was younger. I used to be a bow hunter. As it turns out now, I'm training my grandchildren to shoot a bow in my backyard with balloons and stuff, but we're not going to be hunting any wildlife. But I did it one time. And when I would sit in that tree stand, or when I would still hunt is where you take a few steps and you stop. And then you take a few more steps and you stop. Unbelievable awareness of my physical environment. Unbelievable, acute, sensual. I never felt more alive than when I would do that. I was, like you said, you could hear a pin drop, because I was so much more astutely, sensually amped up. I was smelling, I was looking, I was listening. It just is such a cool moment. So if any of our followers have never sat in a long time, sit in your backyard, sit any place, but intentionally sit for a good 5 to 10 minutes, and just pay attention to what that does for you. So back over to you, my friend. Anything come up for you as I'm talking about using sit spots?
Yeah. Well, actually, I wanted to ask about your observations of working with your grandkids on the shooting a bow. And have you noticed that is an effective way? Does that help them practice mindfulness?
Oh, well, sure, because there are 4 or 5 things you have to do every time pretty well and consistently for the arrow to go where you had hoped it would go. So yes, they have to be mindful of the draw length. So they have to find their anchor point. And they have to be mindful for imagining the flight path of the arrow prior to releasing it, because there are no pins on the bows. They're shooting intuitively. So to shoot intuitively, instinctively, is actually the word that a bow hunter would use, or an archer would use. You're imagining the flight, and it isn't until you really literally imagine the flight of the arrow prior to you releasing it that you get pretty good at doing that. And who would know you could get pretty good at that? And then, of course, it's that art of not dropping the bow. You have to stay still. Your forearm, your shoulder, your head, your musculature, the posture that you are in. So you don't face your target. You turn sideways to your target. All of those things are crucial for consistent satisfaction when you finally release the arrow. So there's a great deal of mindfulness for these children as they gain some ability to shoot better, and they're very happy. The neat thing about shooting a bow is you get very immediate results on how you did. You either hit the big cardboard box or you don't, or you hit the pie plate that you've stapled to the cardboard box, or you don't, or you blow up the little balloon that Papa put in the middle of the cardboard box, or you don't. So for a younger child, it's immediate satisfaction that you did well or you didn't do so well.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing that I love about that is it's really a sensory skill that relies on multiple different senses. You know, you're using your eyes, and you're using both your external vision, like seeing things outside. You're also using your imagination, which is a sensory skill. You're imagining inside your mind the flight path of the arrow. You're using your body awareness, and you know, just tuning in with what your body is, you know, the position of your arms and the tension in the bowstring and all that kind of stuff. And you know, probably even on a more advanced level, especially like, I know if you're hunting animals, you have to be aware of you know, the wind direction and the wind speed and all that kind of stuff. So it's this principle that I think is really key for mindfulness, around stacking different types of awareness together, where you know, you start with just one basic skill, and you know, alone, each of those different, you know, maybe there's like 16 or 20 different things that you have to actually place really conscious focus on in order to successfully fire a bow and hit your target. But at first, because it's your brain can't do those 16 to 20 things all at the same time, you have to go through this learning process where you focus on these things one by one, and you know, you master the standing position, and you really have to pay attention for that, and then you master the you know, how you hold your arms and pull back the string, and where to focus your eyes, and all these things. And eventually you have so many things layering together on a sensory level that it just really, you have to be present in order to do that. And I think it's really that way with so much of, like, you take any kind of nature skill, something as simple as you know, tracking an animal, or you know, gathering everything you need to make a bow drill kit, and you know, create fire from scratch. These are all sensory skills that you know, just call on all the different senses and really layer them all together. And so yeah, it's really you can really feel the results when you work with that kind of stuff.
So I'm going to let our followers know, our listeners know, that as of about a week ago, one of our teammates, Maddie, created a Facebook page. So any of you that are on Facebook, if you do a search for ReWilding, one word, ReWilding, and then second word, conversations, you'll find Brian and I, and we would love to hear from you very soon about what was an activity you did recently where you were in nature, and what you did in nature was fostering this mindfulness. To the degree you could share your story with us on Facebook, that'll only catalyze all the others that tune in and like the page, and you know, we can catalyze some cool experiences that I'm going to get some really neat ideas from all of you that I'll be able to use with my grandchildren and in my speaking gigs on Creative Nature Play. So really hoping that you'll check out ReWilding Conversations and then share a little bit about what you've done, and maybe a picture that facilitates the story you're telling about how you spent a little time in nature and it fostered mindfulness. So Brian, you've got you've got thousands of nature experiences. Can you choose one that stands out that kind of unexpectedly led to a mindful moment, either in your distant past or in your recent past? Is there something that occurred in your life that really, when you think back, wow, that was a really remarkable mindful moment that I was having in nature?
Yeah. One of the ones that comes to my mind, and this was a time when I noticed, I've been practicing mindfulness and just, what I would call nature awareness for, over 10 years now, and, really, really intentionally through a lot of that time. And so I sort of get used to a certain level of experience, and going outside and doing my sit spot routines, and I get used to the way that it feels being out there, and the kinds of experiences that I have, on an internal level as a result. But this is sort of, I did have an experience that taught me something really interesting about how the human brain works outside, and it was basically when it was an unexpected thing, because it actually took me a lot deeper than I typically would go, and so what I was sitting out there, and it was right around, it was in the evening, and so this was before sunset. And it was in the springtime, and the weather had kind of gotten to the point where it was actually, for the first time in the year, it was comfortable to sit out there. And I just found myself, especially when it's comfortable to sit outside, I get this strong desire to just sit there for really, really long periods of time. Sometimes I'll sit out there for 2 or 3 hours, and just really bask in the feeling. And this particular day, I was listening to robins and juncos and song sparrows hanging out. And as the sun went down, it got darker and darker, and I felt this transition from daylight into nighttime. And there was just something about the dramatic change in the light conditions and the different soundscape that was happening around, because when I first went out, the birds were sort of doing their evening routine, and when I finished, everything was completely still, completely quiet, going to sleep. And it was like, as I went through that experience in full sensory awareness, really being present to that whole thing over a period. It was probably about 2 hours that I was sitting out there for, watching all these changes occur. At the end of it, I just felt like incredible. I felt amazing. Just like in my emotional state, I had an absolute peak experience, because it was just so incredible. I felt like the whole universe was sitting there with me in my backyard, and that for me, I think about that moment, and just the lessons that come when you sit outside with some kind of change like that, like around dusk or dawn, or a really dramatic shift like that can be a really significant catalyst for just getting to a really deep level of mindfulness.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff we can't seem to find on Amazon, can we? Or using our credit cards. So another thing for us to remember is this stuff is free, often free. This stuff has no carbon footprint. It's highly sustainable. This nature stuff, this mindfulness stuff, this sit spot stuff, this breath awareness stuff, this listening stuff. So you talk about wise, earth-friendly behavior. It doesn't get much more earth-friendly than what we're talking about in this podcast. So I'm smiling as I say it, because you forget the remarkable list of benefits that are associated with something, and it's all free. It's right there for the experience. I'd like to just touch a little bit in our call today, Brian, about some subpopulation. You'll pick one, I'll pick one. So I'm throwing a few populations of people like children or adolescents or adults or elders or grandparents. And I'll choose one and talk about, so let's say I was a grandparent or an elder, or I was going to be with other grandparents or elders. How might I, as an elder, or if I was responsible for making sure they had a good mindful time outside, what would that look like? How could that go? What would it look like to manage that event, to guide that kind of an event? And I think for me, since I've chosen the elder population, I think they themselves are already gifted. I think elders have slowed down. Grandparents have slowed down a bit. So they're going to be an easy group to work with. They're not going to need or maybe physically want to go real far. So get them in at the spot where it's comfortable physically, perhaps in the shade, perhaps by some stream nearby that you could get them to rather easily. Do a little breath awareness with them. Take them through a few minutes of focused breathing. Many of them will probably be pretty comfortable at closing their eyes if they wish, but if they wish to use the gift of sight, invite them to keep their eyes open and see what they see during this mindful immersion. And then just say, hey, we're going to be here for about 5 minutes, and I've invited you to bring a very lightweight chair if you felt you wanted to sit in a chair. So we've all got chairs if we wanted one. For those of you that didn't bring a chair, find a soft piece of moss or a log or something and get yourself settled in. And I'll guide you through a little bit of breath awareness, and we'll get still and quiet. And then when we're done, we'll give each other a chance to partner with someone. The reason I say partner is because I find when I'm with a small group, you have some people that naturally like to talk, but you have a lot of people that isn't their preferred style. They aren't going to share out. But if you invite them to turn to a partner, person, they're often pretty comfortable with sharing their experience with one other person. So then we might have a little bit of conversation with each other about what was that like, and give them that chance to talk with each other. And then gently mosey on out and maybe make it a 45-minute, hour-long adventure. Certainly it wouldn't need to be anything resembling a full or half day. It could be shorter than that. So you could weave it into part of an activity if there was a larger event going on. Or you could keep it light and rather small in terms of the time investment. So there's my effort at trying to be tangible and act as a mentor myself with those listening in. If you have the opportunity or honor or pleasure of being with some elder folks that you love or how about you, Brian? Is there a population that you might have you worked with or you'd like to work with, and describe how you might do that so that others could get a sense from your wisdom of what would work?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I've been talking a lot recently with teachers and people who are either in a traditional classroom setting, like maybe even in like an elementary school or a university, and they're dealing in it's not like a nature school. It's like just a really it's like the standard schooling system that everyone kind of thinks about, that everyone goes through in the North America modern world, and how it's been occurring to me that just how beneficial it really can be, how much more people are open to learn and able to learn when you take a few minutes to just help them expand their awareness a little bit before diving into the material. And it can be even something as simple like if you're in a classroom, just getting everyone to close their eyes and just listen for a minute or two, and maybe point out a couple things and say, hey, do you hear that bird coming in through the window, the sound of the bird out the window, and just sort of point out a few things. Do you, just settle in here for a minute. Let's just relax because we're gonna be moving into this material, and let's just take a little break here. And also thinking about, in the situation where there is like a nature school and like you're running a nature-based program, oftentimes kids specifically will be like very, very high energy after like if you're doing like an after-school program or something, and you're trying to get some sort of learning outcome around the nature-based curriculum, but they just want to like run and talk and jump around and cause chaos. And so, I would, and the experience that they often have is like they try to get into their lesson plan. They try to do some sort of more focused activity that's going to really help them learn something new. But the kids are so bouncing off the walls that they're not really able to absorb the lesson. And so, what I have found works for that is doing some sort of really active game. And then the really important thing is after you kind of get all that energy out, now you bring them back together and do some sort of sense meditation. Just really drop into the moment, ask them about what they're hearing, what are they seeing, just listen for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
Just listen to the sounds.
Yeah.
And then move into your more focused activity. You'll find that they're much more open and much more able to hear what you're saying and engage with the material. So, yeah.
Neat. Great advice. Thank you. So, well, I think I've just looked over my notes that I had prepared for talking a little bit, and I asked myself, is there something unsaid? Is there something more? And I'm feeling pretty good, but I wanted to extend the invitation to you on this topic of nature immersion and mindfulness. Is there one other thread you'd like to touch on in our conversation today?
Yeah, I think one thing that I would just invite for anyone listening is to just take a moment and reflect on where is an area that you might be able to apply this, because I think about mindfulness practices and especially being mindful in nature, like using a sit spot to go outside for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes per day. It's the great equalizer where if you are if you're having basically a lot of stress, this is a great way to de-stress. If you are actually lacking in energy and focus, if you find that you're just like, man, I just don't have any energy, this will boost your energy. If you find that you're like over-energized and like scattered and just bouncing off the walls, unable to get to sleep, this will bring you back to the balance. And so, whatever it is that is sort of taking you off your center, this is the thing that you can do to just bring yourself back. And I just encourage everyone to actually try it out and feel the difference that it makes for you, and to think about what context in your life, because everyone is different. What is it for you? Where is the greatest opportunity for you to apply mindfulness and actually come back to your peaceful, calm, centered state of mind in your daily life, and then go out and do it. Just give it a try, and definitely let us know what happens.
Yeah. So it'll be a blast hearing some of you show up on the ReWilding Conversations Facebook page and getting to know you at a more personal level and letting yourself be known by the other community, by the community that we've created. So thanks for your willingness to listen in today, and we look forward to talking with you again in about 2 weeks' time. And be well, my friends. Be well and enjoy nature's gift of mindfulness.